So the last bit then is storytelling, which is really
Mm,
big at the moment, isn't it?
yep.
How would you suggest sort of, a company using all the elements that we've talked about now then, and then building that into sort of storytelling?
So there is science behind storytelling as well, and the idea of storytelling in business has caught on, and everybody talks about it. But I think people understand business storytelling a little bit differently. Like when they think about business storytelling, they often think about it as a story about you, as a story about your solutions and your products. And maybe you have a case study in there and there's a story about the case study. And that's what people tend to think of as storytelling. But at the end of the day, the business stories that you tell should be about your buyer. Your buyer is the hero of the story. And you have to tell a story about their journey. And like I said, there is science behind storytelling. There's an awesome book, by the way, which I recommend to anybody who's listening to this podcast, called Wired for Story, and it's by a woman named Lisa Kron, Cron, and it's a book for fiction writers. But I recommend it to every business writer as well because the concepts of fiction writing and business writing are very, very much the same. But it's all about how the brain reacts to stories. But there's actually three scientific components to what makes a great story, and they are perceptive, cognitive, and affective. And the perceptive components are simply the things that you experience with your senses. So the things that you see, the things that you hear, the things that you taste and smell, and how do you describe those in the story? And then the other part of perceptive is action across time. Like something needs to happen in the story. The hero needs to undergo some sort of change and get to a better outcome. So if you translate that into a business story, that means that your buyer, who is the hero of the story, needs to see themselves progress through that change. They need to face a challenge. They need to overcome that challenge. They need to see what the outcome of that is going to be. And that's all the perceptive part of the stories. Cognitive is the data, it's the hard facts. And a lot of marketers lean really, really hard into cognitive because it feels safe from a business perspective. Like, oh, if I just throw all these statistics at someone, then they'll sort through them and they'll understand. And you need cognitive, but I think business writers over rely on cognitive a little bit too much. And then the final component of storytelling is affective, which is feelings, which is emotion. Again, something that business writers tend to shy away from because we're told that you shouldn't be emotional, you should just be fact-based. That's all buyers care about. But every buyer has emotions, and decisions are made emotionally. They're not made rationally. People make decisions with emotion and justify them with facts, which is why you need the cognitive in there. But you have to be able to appeal to their emotions. And I don't like to talk about fear, uncertainty, and doubt as something that, marketers should rely on, but you do have to introduce risk. You do have to engage them emotionally. You need to make them want something. And a lot of times you make them want them by something by showing them the risk, either the risk of not changing if you're trying to get to a new customer, or the risk of changing if you're talking to an existing customer. So you need to be able to balance that introduction of risk in your story so that you're not going overboard with it, but you're letting them know what the stakes are. Because at the end of the day, every story is about stakes. What do they have invested in solving this problem and finding this solution?
Yeah, because I think you think about presentations going back years ago, it was all about the company, the product.
Mhm.
Whereas now it's very much the other way, isn't it? As you talked about, it's more that story about what is happening in the overall market, and
Yep.
therefore what are you potentially missing out on, or what are the risks there if you don't do. So that
Yeah.
emotional stuff, and emotion is key, isn't it? You hear of people
Yeah.
buying things because they have an affinity with the people, the brand, whatever it might be. So I think emotion is really, really key.
And to give marketers credit, and I give them a ton of credit in this, I think most really, really good marketers know. They know now that you can't go out and just talk about yourself and talk about your
Mm,
stuff. They get
mm.
that, and they've gotten that for years. But the mistake that I think marketers make is not that they're talking about themselves, but that they're generalizing benefits a little bit too much. We've been told for years, sell the value, sell the value, sell the value, right? So we tend to use like really high level, fluffy, adjective, superlative type language to talk about our stuff like state of the art and
Best
you'll
in
get this
class.
great benefit, you'll increase customer engagement, all benefits, which is great, but benefits aren't differentiated. Like, because your competition is not out there saying, hey, you know what's different about us? You'll use our stuff, you will never engage a single customer again, right? Like, everybody's saying the same thing. What our research shows is that including the right, what we call telling details in your story, um, tangible, concrete things that your buyer is going to be able to do differently with your solution, not the benefits that they'll achieve, but the actual actions that they're going to be able to take, increase the credibility and persuasiveness of a pitch by up to 95%.
Wow. Because that, I think of going back years ago when I, was doing a little bit of selling, not for very long
Yeah.
and not very well either. But I was always taught about features and benefits. But as you talk
Mhm.
about it, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because the benefits are always things like, reducing operational complexity,
Yeah.
reducing costs. They become very samey, don't they? And in a
Yeah.
world where you're trying to differentiate, it's not a good place to be.
Yeah, and it's a really simple exercise. It's about asking the next level question down, right? So you say you'll be able, if you buy our thing, you'll be able to reduce operational costs. Well, great, duh. You're not gonna say that you're going to increase operational costs, but the question, the level down question is how. How do you do that? What action can you specifically take with our thing to reduce operational costs? So, for example, when you buy XYZ logistics, your truck drivers will be able to type their route into a GPS location and get the fastest way to that location. That's a telling concrete detail about what your buyer is going to be able to do that will result in the lower operational costs. But you're giving them the ability to make that connection themselves. And when they do that, that encodes the memory in their brain, much more than you just telling them the high level abstract idea.
Yeah, excellent. Where can people go to find out more about this? It's been an absolute fascinating chat with you, Leslie.
Yeah, so Corporate Visions, www.corporatevisions.com. In our resource library, we have all of our research studies, as well as a number of tools and checklists and different things that you can use to put some of these concepts into action. You can also go to b2bdecisionlabs.com and get just the straight research and the research briefs and all of the studies and scientific experiments that we've done to explore these different concepts. But yeah, come on over and download whatever you want, and we're happy to have a more detailed conversation with anyone. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me directly, Leslie Talbot. Really simple, and I'd be happy to answer any questions folks have.